Welcome to this explainer. Let's just jump straight into it, shall we? Today, we are completely unpacking the Canadian legal system. But don't worry, we're absolutely not just going to read through some dry, dusty textbook. We're going to look at all of this through the lens of a real-world scenario. So I want you to meet Sarah. Sarah is a super motivated entrepreneur, and she's about to open a brand new boutique cafe and tech workspace right in the heart of Toronto. It's going to be this great spot where people can grab a brilliant espresso and then rent out these high-tech pods to get their work done. But here's the catch. Before she sells a single cup of coffee, she is stepping into a wildly complex web of rules, regulations, and protections. Today, we're going to be her guide.
To really understand why Sarah needs to care about the law, we first have to ask a pretty fundamental question. What would society actually look like with no rules, no courts, and no police? Take a second and just imagine a truly chaotic world. If Sarah bought a massive, insanely expensive commercial espresso machine, someone could just walk right in and take it with zero punishment. Or what about the contractors she hired to build those fancy tech pods? They could take her deposit and just never do the work. She'd have absolutely no way to force them to honor the agreement. Her business would be totally unsafe. So you see, the legal framework isn't just a bunch of annoying red tape. It is literally the foundation that allows an entrepreneur like Sarah to trust the market and actually build her dream.
And that chaotic scenario perfectly illustrates our core definition. Law is a system of rules established and enforced by government authorities to regulate behavior, maintain order, resolve disputes, and protect rights. Now, the really cool thing about this concept is how it applies to everyone equally. In Canada, we call this the rule of law. It means nobody, not politicians, not massive multinational corporations, and definitely not the police. Nobody's above the law. For Sarah, this rule of law guarantees that her little small business is protected by the exact same system of rights and freedoms as the biggest tech giants in the country. It gives her stability. So consider everything we cover moving forward as your diploma-level syllabus. We're taking you from high-level constitutional concepts straight down to the everyday realities of running a business.
Here is our quick roadmap for today. We'll cover why we need law, the sources of Canadian law, the division of powers, public versus private law, criminal versus civil law, and finally, law in daily business.
Okay, let's get right into Chapter 1, Sources of Canadian Law.
We know Sarah has to follow the rules, right? But where do the rules for her new cafe actually come from? Well, Canadian law doesn't just come from one single place. It's actually built on four main pillars. Step 1 is the Constitution. This is the big one, the supreme law of Canada. It includes the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and sets the absolute boundaries for everything else. No law can violate it, period. Step 2 is legislation, or statute law. These are the actual written rules passed by Parliament or provincial legislatures, like the Employment Standards Act that Sarah has to follow for her employees. Step 3 is common law, and this is fascinating. In most of Canada, judges actually help build the law over time. When a judge decides a case, they look back at previous court decisions. This relies on a principle called stare decisis, which essentially means following precedent. It keeps things consistent. And finally, Step 4 is administrative law. This is all the specialized, nitty-gritty regulations created by government agencies and tribunals, like labor boards. But there's a really unique twist here in Canada. We actually have a dual legal tradition. Most of the country, including Sarah's Toronto Cafe, uses that common law system we just talked about, which relies on judicial precedent. But what if Sarah's Cafe is a massive hit and she decides, hey, I'm opening a second location in Montreal? Well, suddenly her private business matters, like her contracts and property leases, would fall under Quebec's civil law system. And unlike common law, the civil law system relies heavily on comprehensive written legal codes rather than looking back at what past judges did. It's a hugely important distinction for any entrepreneur looking to expand nationally.
Moving right along to Chapter 2, the Division of Powers.
Canada is a massive country. So which level of government actually gets to make the rules for the different parts of Sarah's business? The Canadian Constitution very carefully divides up lawmaking authority. For example, if Sarah needs a small business loan to buy all her coffee inventory, the banking regulations she's dealing with are federal. That's because the federal government handles big national issues like banking, international trade, and criminal law. But when Sarah hires her baristas and figures out their vacation pay, she's now dealing with provincial powers. Provinces cover regional issues like employment standards, education, and healthcare. And finally, when she needs to figure out how many parking spots her cafe legally needs or what day the garbage gets picked up, that's when she's dealing with municipal bylaws. Every single level of government touches her business, but in completely different ways.
Next up, Chapter 3, Public versus Private Law.
The law is literally everywhere. So how on earth do we categorize all these rules? Honestly, it's easiest to think about it in terms of relationships. Public law governs the relationship between individuals or businesses and the government. It's really about society as a whole. So when Sarah pays her corporate taxes, or if she ever had to challenge a local law on constitutional grounds, she's operating in the world of public law. Private law, on the other hand, governs the relationships between individuals or organizations. So when Sarah signs a lease agreement with her landlord for the cafe space, or she signs a contract with that amazing local bakery to supply fresh croissants, she's using private law to manage her business relationships.
Let's transition to Chapter 4, Criminal versus Civil Law.
So what happens when things go wrong? We need to clearly distinguish between a harm done to society and a private dispute. Let's say someone breaks into Sarah's cafe in the middle of the night and steals that ridiculously expensive espresso machine. That is a crime. The whole purpose of criminal law is to protect society and punish the offender. The government, also known as the Crown, will prosecute the thief, and they have to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That is a very high standard to meet, and the outcome could be imprisonment. But let's change the scenario. What if the supplier that Sarah already paid simply fails to deliver her imported coffee beans? That's not a crime, that's just a private dispute. In this case, Sarah would use civil law to sue the supplier. Her goal here isn't to put the supplier in jail. Her goal is to get compensation or monetary damages for the sales she lost out on. And the burden of proof here is a lot lower. It's called a balance of probabilities, which basically just means it's more likely than not that the supplier breached their agreement.
Now for Chapter 5, Law in Daily Business.
Let's really zoom in on the specific types of private and civil law that Sarah is going to interact with every single day she unlocks her doors. These are the absolute essential building blocks of commerce. First up, contract law. Every single time a customer pays for a coffee and books a tech pod, a legally enforceable agreement is made. It requires an offer, an acceptance, and consideration, which is just the legal term for exchanging something of value. Second is tort law. This deals with civil wrongs that cause harm. Let's say a barista mops the floor, forgets to put up the wet floor sign, and a customer slips and breaks their wrist. Sarah could actually be sued for negligence under tort law to compensate that injured person. Third, we have employment law. This dictates providing a safe work environment, paying minimum wage, and following overtime rules for her staff. And fourth is property law. This doesn't just protect the physical space she's leasing, it also protects her intellectual property, like the incredibly unique logo and branding she designed for the cafe.
It's kind of wild when you think about how deeply the legal system is intertwined with our most mundane actions. Driving the company car across town to pick up supplies? That's traffic law. Selling a branded coffee mug to a regular? Consumer protection law. Managing her team of baristas? Employment law. Even just renting the cafe space relies entirely on landlord-tenant law. A truly successful entrepreneur doesn't just sell a great product. They have to expertly navigate this massive matrix of legal obligations to minimize their risks and protect their investment.
Finally, Chapter 6, The Future of Law. Society absolutely does not stand still, and neither do the rules we live by. Remember those high-tech workspace pods Sarah installed? Well, to manage them, she implements a brand new mobile app where customers can book their time, unlock the physical pods, and pay for everything online. But instantly, she is faced with a whole host of modern legal challenges. Now she has to protect her customers' credit card information from cybercrime and online fraud. She has to carefully navigate data privacy laws regarding exactly how she stores their personal information. If she decides to use a fancy AI chatbot for a customer service, she has to make sure it complies with new, emerging artificial intelligence regulations. And as she sources her disposable coffee cups, she has to align with strict new environmental protection and climate regulations about waste disposal. The Canadian legal system is basically running a marathon right now, racing to adapt to these incredibly fast-paced technological and social shifts. Law is highly dynamic.
Which leaves us with this final, really vital question to ponder. As technology continues to accelerate at breakneck speed, how will modern challenges like AI and cybercrime fundamentally rewrite the rules of Canadian business? Will the law even be able to keep up with the next generation of entrepreneurs like Sarah? I really want you to think about how these rapidly evolving laws might start impacting your own life or your own business ventures. Thank you so much for watching this explainer. If you found this diploma-level deep dive helpful, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss out on our structured breakdowns. See you next time.